This is the Perfect RIA, in case you didn't know. Bringing you all the strategies to help your business grow. Are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you hanging on the edge of your seat? Sit back and listen in while you feel the beat, yeah!
So I got Surge scheduled, but now what? What am I supposed to talk about to my clients in Surge meetings?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, join me from what looks like an emergency staircase exit in his condo in Hawaii, Micah Shalansky. Micah, how are you?
Jarvis, I'm doing fantastic. Aloha to everyone out there. Just doing great. Super excited. We're doing a little family retreat, as you know. Super excited to be busting out some great content and talking about some exciting things that are coming up. And actually, we're going to get into some head trash conversation with this one as well, I think.
Yeah, really excited to be talking about Surge. And of course, as you're listening to this, it's mid-February. Most of you are doing Surge. Most of the industry is doing Surge in a March-April timeframe. So Surge is just around the corner. This is when you need to be having that meeting with your team. Say, great, Surge is coming up. What days are we doing Surge? What times are we doing Surge? What's going on the email invite? What are the handouts going to be? So there are a lot of things that need to be going into motion, literally, Micah, this week.
Yeah, the misconception is that there's no other work to be done outside of Surge, right? Which anyone that's done Surge knows that's not the case. We're funneling a lot of work into Surge, which is great. And we're able to provide so much value because we're able to get in the same rhythm, right? Meeting clients, delivering value, doing that consistently again and again and again, which makes Surge so fantastic. But in order for that successful Surge, Jarvis, just like you talked about, there's a lot of things we have to ramp up and get ready to do. And getting your team on board is a huge element in Surge. And getting everything outlined in advance. One of our rules in Surge we talked about before is there are no changes in Surge, right? We don't implement new things in Surge. Hey, and the team is empowered to push back on me because I'll have like a 15 or 30 minute break. I'm like, hey, I heard about this great idea. What if we go and do X for the rest of our appointments? And they're like, no, Micah, that's not what we agreed to, right? We're not changing things in Surge. So we got to brainstorm these in advance and say, hey, what are we going to do in Surge? And then also, Jarvis, I'm a huge fan of a dress rehearsal. We have a dress rehearsal before we leave to our team retreat. The entire team is in office, and it was so funny. I got the question the other day. Well, what's the dress attire for the dress rehearsal? Clearly, you
kind of in the name. Kind of in the name.
So did you play sports? Did you do acting? Anything like that? Right? When it was game day, did you show up in your practice jersey, or did you show up ready to play in your real jersey? Right? Same thing. It's the real thing. Dress rehearsal. Everybody's dressing up, suit and tie, whole 9 yards. We're coming in, and we're going to crush this like it was a day, and we're going to run through everything and make sure it works.
Yeah, that's critical. And so part of that dress rehearsal entails having a full Surge packet. I prefer having 2 or 3 ready, having those. And so here we are, we're middle of February. Surge isn't starting for a couple weeks. I already want to have that full packet. And I want to, as an advisor, sit down and not just say, oh yeah, this looks cute, really go through it. And in my mind, and if you're new at this and if you really want a next level, you're going to verbally out loud speak through your entire meeting process. Now, I know that feels silly, but let me just tell you, I meet with top advisors all the time, and I meet with not top advisors, and the top advisors do this. And as silly as it seems, I sit down in my conference room with my Surge packet. I have it turned the way I would turn for a client. I have my pen in my hand, and I'm walking through that. And that's where I can notice, wait a second, this report doesn't actually make sense as I'm speaking it out loud. Or, these need to be in a different order. And that's when I go back to the team before they've printed 60 of them, when they've printed 2 or 3 and say, hey, let's make these couple of adjustments now. And then, Micah, to your point, now it's locked in stone. Short of errors that we find, it's locked in stone.
Yeah, and I'm not looking for sample data. I want real client data, by the way, because sample data, I'm like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. And a client, it's going to be different, right? And I start minimizing those things. And so what I found is I take whatever first couple clients that I have coming in Surge, that's the data I'm running with. And so when I'm sitting down, I'm like, all right, this is really Bob, this is really Sue, and I'm really going through it and visualizing them there having this conversation. That's when I find the errors. That's when I find, not even errors isn't the right word, the nuances of how I want to do things differently in that exact thing. So don't undermine this. This is a massive thing that you need to do, and you need to bring your team inside of there as well. one of the things that I try to do is grab one of my team members and bring them in the conference room, and they become Bob and Sue.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I want them to see what we're doing in the conference room as to why the order matters. And I got to say another thing, just going a little rant here. We do financial planning with all of our team members, right? It's their choice. Fortunately, I can't mandate it. But most of our team members take us up on this. And after they've sat in that conference room as on the client side, the transformation that we see in their production is amazing, because what happens is they see why these little things matter. They see why all of these things put together in a certain order really adds to that value and experience versus if you don't have things put together. So anyways, just a pro tip that's out there. Do financial planning for your team. Help them be successful. That not only helps them, it really helps you as well.
Yeah, it does. And sometimes, Mike, I wonder where the line is between being super intentional and being a diva. Now, that would not apply to me. There's advisors out there I'm sure that it applies to. But I'm even looking, Mike, I'm looking at what color is the paper that we're printing on. What things do I want single-sided and double-sided? Some things I don't mind that are double-sided. A lot of things I want single-sided. And again, I'm walking through how am I going to do this? This is also where you're going to say, hey, what is the agenda, the printed agenda or Zoom agenda as a PDF? And then that needs to go in the invites. If you haven't started sending your invites out yet for Surge, those need to go out. And in that invite, it needs to say, hey, here's what we're going to discuss. Now, again, I know that probably 70 or 80% of the meeting is the same from Surge to Surge, right? We're reviewing some of the same things, but I want to highlight for the client, hey, I look forward to seeing you in March. We're going to review through, of course, your questions and concerns, but we're also going to touch on these three critical things. What are those three critical things? We're going to talk about the new tax law changes. Then we'd look at whatever other value adds we wanted to look at. But so for clients, right, we're going to just say, here's three things we're going to look at. Tax law changes. What's your cash flow doing? What are some adjustments we need to make this year looking forward? Now, you might think to yourself, wow, that covers pretty much the whole world. It does. It gives me a lot of room to work in.
A lot of flexibility to be right. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things, too, is when you send out that invite, we started this a few years ago, is we always ask the client what questions they have. And there's a sample of that email inside of Backstage Pass, so you can jump in there and check it out. But it basically says, Mr. and Mrs. Client. Now, our relationship manager sent this out, Mr. and Mrs. Client, and this goes out 2 weeks before the client appointment. Hey, Micah's really excited to meet with you at your upcoming appointment at this date, at this time. Now, if they're not in Alaska, it's their time zone, open parentheses, Alaska time zone, close parentheses. Why do we put both time zones in there? Because sometimes we make a mistake when we're doing time zone conversions. And most of our clients know Alaska time is whatever difference in theirs, and it'll help spot any of those errors, and we can find it in an email confirmation versus the day before the appointment versus an hour before the appointment, that day of the appointment, et cetera, right? So we always put them there. But hey, Micah's really excited to meet with you at your appointment at this time, et cetera. Micah had several things to go over, but most importantly, he wanted to know what questions you have to add to the agenda to make sure we can answer those. You can just reply to this email and let me know what those questions are, so we can be addressed in your appointment. Now, not all of our clients, in fact, the vast majority of our clients don't hit that reply button, but they all love it. I got feedback across the board from clients that they love getting that and saying, you know what, I really appreciated that opportunity. And sometimes the questions come in the day before, right? The day before, the hour before, the minute before, when they're in the lobby, they hit their reply button. Yeah, then they send off their questions like, did you get it? I'm like, no, what? I didn't get it, right? And I go back, I'm like, oh, you sent it 7 minutes ago. Thanks. But, it empowers the client to ask questions to our team. And I got to say, that is just a huge value add you can send to the client, super easy to do. All right, so I'll get off that soapbox. But even the client invite, to the meeting, even the confirmation, these things count.
Mike, I don't think you can ask that question too often. In fact, in my office, we've almost played around if there's too many times to ask, what else would you like to add to the agenda? Not, this is a rookie move, do you have any questions?
Yes.
It's what questions would you like to add? What items do you have? And so weird, to your point, every confirmation is having that. And then, of course, when we sit down after we do our small talk and how are you doing and how are the kids and how's your health, my very first thing, Mr. and Mrs. Klein, I have several items for us to review today. But before we start on that, what questions or concerns do you have? Let's always start with those. And again, this is just a piece that comes up again and again. We've talked about this at length, that if a client has a question that you haven't gotten to, they're not listening to anything else you say until that question has been addressed, or at least you said, here's when I'm going to address it.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Jarvis, before we get too far into this, I actually want to step back a little bit and talk about what is Surge, because Surge has taken wildfire, which I friggin' love across, but a little bit of confusion that's coming out there. I kind of hear two things. Either people are saying, well, I don't do Surge because I don't do it the way Micah does it. Okay, well, that's not Surge. That's just the way I'm doing it, right? So we'll talk about that. And then the other thing is I'm hearing people are like, well, I do surge, and I hear what it is, and they're pretty much doing meetings all day long. They're in the office all day long doing 2 meetings a day for 3 months, and then they redo the whole thing all over again for the next 3 months. I'm like, okay, that's not surge either, right? So what is surge? Surge is a concept which we're going to condense seeing all of your clients in the next 6 months within the next 4 to 5 weeks. That's the concept of surge. Now, depending on your client load, it could be more, it could be smaller, something inside of there. It does not mean you need to do 35 to 40 appointments a week like I do. That's not what you're going for, right? It's all about being intentional. It's about condensing your clients. Instead of saying in the next 6 months, we're going to condense our clients within a limited period of time so that we can add the most value, and being hyper intentional about the times that you choose. I prefer to get all of my clients in. I get really excited. I shift in that high gear. I like staying in that gear. I got another advisor, Ben Brandt, who does a fantastic job doing this. And he has more of the lifestyle side. He wants to drop his kids off to school. He wants to pick them up after school. So his surge is longer because he has less appointments a day. Well, great. He's still hyper intentional about it. He's still taking that concept to all my clients in the next 6 months. I'm condensing down to seeing this time period so I can add the most value to them. So when you say surge, let's be really intentional about what does that mean, and not just say, oh, yeah, I'm doing it, or yeah, I can never do it, when you're not really analyzing that and saying, no, how do you do this from a best practice standpoint?
And if we were to quantify that, Mike, and this is a little bit off the cuff, I would say that it's probably 75% to 90% of your meetings in a 6 month for the 6 month period happen during that set period of time. So again, you look at the first half of the year, January to July, end of June, that 90% or so of those meetings happen during whatever weeks you've designated for surge. And again, you may say to yourself, wait, this is the same number of meetings. It is, but as Henry Ford proved over 100 years ago, doing things again and again in the same order dramatically, typically tenfolds your productivity. So while this is beneficial for our lifestyles, while it's beneficial for working on projects, ultimately it benefits the client the most because they're getting a repeatable experience. So it's going to be a better experience. And then you've got the rest of that year or that 6 month period to work on things that need to be done behind the scenes.
Yes. Projects, learning, anything else that goes inside of that, becoming a better leader, becoming a better financial advisor, all of those things you now have time for, because one of the things we hear again and again when people don't do surge, I don't have time for X. Well, congratulations, you do, because guess what? We all have the same amount of time in the day. I love time. It is our great equalizer. From Elon Musk to me to you, we all have the same 24 hours in the day, right? The question is, how are you going to optimize those 24 hours in a day to get the most advantage, to deliver the most value to you, to your family, and most importantly, to your clients?
Yeah, and Mike, I know we're on a bit of a side rant here. I've yet to find an advisor that implemented surge that went back or that regretted it. Definitely, I've had advisors that were a little bit blindsided by the amount of work. They hadn't done the math, as you mentioned earlier, that, hey, if you did 100 meetings spread over 6 months, you have that same amount of work in 3 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever your surge period is. You've condensed it down. So they are hard. They are a lot of work. That's why it's called massive value and not like mediocre couch value. It is a lot of work, but the payoff is immense. Every advisor we've ever seen do it, it has transformed their practice. I know that's a bold claim. Try it out. Tell me I'm wrong.
All right. So we talked about, all right, thank you, Jarvis. I love that little rant on there about what is search.
That's right,
right.
yeah.
So we talked about the client agenda, which is so key. And then the other thing that comes up, and Jarvis, this is my head trash. And in fact, when you and I were planning, because we sync up on our surges, which is great, and the value adds that we're going to do, and when we're planning out our agenda for surge meetings, I look at the surge meeting agendas. I'm like, holy crap, that's 5 minutes of content with a client. What the hell am I going to say for the extra 55 minutes? Right? What am I? And my hands are on my head. I'm like stressing out. I'm like rubbing my temples. Right? And it's even after doing this for 22 years inside of the practice, I still get those moments of head trash, and I got to take a breath. And I gotta say, hold on a second. This is what I've done hyper successfully. This is what works. Me adding more stuff on the agenda just to add more stuff on the agenda does not add value. So I gotta be hyper intentional. What goes on my agenda must be massive value. Now, that doesn't limit what I can talk about, right? We've all had clients come in with curveballs. I got this great agenda. I've asked them, do they have any questions in advance? Or what are their questions? And they have said they don't have any. Then they come in and a life-altering event happens. Agenda goes out the window. We're now focused on something else, right? That's going to happen. So this doesn't limit what I can talk about, but these are the key things that in my ideal world, I'm going to hit with every single client. That's what needs to be on your agenda so it can be systematized and more value can be added to clients.
And again, this is both your sort of figurative agenda, right? But it is literally your printed agenda, right? And it's starting out, number one, your questions and concerns. That's always top. Then typically number two for me is always some kind of market education. Now, this is not economic commentary. This is not what we think the Federal Reserve is going to do in the next 6 weeks. It's stepping back and saying, let's look at some sort of macroeconomic trend over decades. Micah, one we did recently that I'm going to actually, well, not recently, we did it several years ago, but I'm going to use again during Surge, is looking at computing power over the last now 50 years. And it's computing power against the price of computing power. Now, why would we look at that? Because it helps us step back and say, hey, over the last 50 years, we've had good markets and bad markets and high inflation and low inflation and global conflict and everything you can imagine. And yet computing power continues to steadily increase. There's no reason to think that will stop. What that does is it gets us out of whatever the headline is. It gets us out of whatever our current concern is and says, you know what, big picture, we've been here before. The reason I do that is because every client, virtually every client, still has questions and concerns about the economy. No matter how well adjusted they are, there's still some concerns. And so I'm taking that elephant out of the room. I'm saying, great, big picture, the world is still going to be just fine. All right, now let's go into the next items.
I love it. I generally save my economic commentary piece a little bit later in the meetings. I like to start off, number one, with their questions, and number two, cash flow. And I would say cash flow is the heartbeat of your retirement, right? If you have a solid cash flow, you get to do the things that you want to do. If you don't have a solid cash flow, retirement's not that fun. So I'm always jumping into cash flow. And then I'm just like, great, how's cash flow going? And generally I get a joking answer. Well, it's flowing, right? But I'm looking for that response about how do they feel, right, with cash flow. Then I get into more that's more qualitative. Then I get into more quantitative that says, okay, great. What are the balances we have in checking and savings? And now they go through the list of their balances. Sometimes they just give me an aggregate. Sometimes they break it down by account. And then I ask them how much a month that they're spending, because these are numbers that I want my clients to know. I'm not looking for a budget with 72 different line items on it, right? But I'm looking for, do they know how much a month they spend? Because in my experience, when we know how much a month we spend on average, we make better financial decisions. And that's what I tell my clients, is saying, look, I want you to know these numbers, because if you know them off the top of your head, you're going to make better financial decisions. When you don't know it, generally we're not making good financial decisions. So I want them to know checking and saving balances. I want to know generally how much a month that they spend. Now, what else does this do for me? This really helps me forecast things, right? If I met with them 6 months ago and I had their checking and savings balance and they say they're spending $7,000 a month, and I get their new checking and savings balance, they still telling me they're spending $7,000 a month, but there's $50,000 less in savings. What happened? Right? This is a really quick pulse that I get to take in between each one of these meetings to say, is this number accurate? And it's really helped me, Jarvis, over time, predict problems that are coming up when a client is overspending.
Yeah, and this is where experienced advisors separate themselves from people who spend their time just studying in academia, right? So academia would tell you, even if we're looking at a guardrails approach, hey, any year where there's a positive market and inflation, we do an inflation adjustment. The experienced advisor realizes that while inflation impacts everybody, it impacts everyone differently. And so it's when you're talking to the client, hey, how is your cash flow? And some of your clients will say, no, my cash flow is great. Even though they haven't had an inflation adjustment in 5 years, my cash flow is great. Other clients will say, geez, we're really feeling squeezed tight. Micah, to your point, our balances are coming down. That's where you can look and say, all right, we need to make an inflation adjustment. How do we make that work? So again, it's about real life, not just what's on a piece of paper.
And because I prepared in advance for the meeting, Jarvis, I already know where they're at in their buckets report. And I know how much free cash flow we have, right? Could I increase their distribution? Can I not increase their distribution? I know what the retirement income is coming in. So then that sets me up for how I'm going to lead into that buckets conversation, because I have that baseline on cash flow.
Speaking of buckets and guardrails, of course, we recently had an article last month in Kitsis about how to implement guardrails in your practice. Mike and I are working on how to combine buckets and guardrails into a bit of a turducken, a chicken turkey duck. So we're going to figure out, so if you can help us come up with a name of the combined buckets guardrails, that would be great. Turducken has been taken, and it's a bit confusing. So maybe we're thinking like barrails or gardets. So neither of those have quite the right ring to them. But back to, on a serious note, by having looked at those, Right before I go into the meeting, I'm glancing at all those numbers again. Okay, I know kind of where we're at. So again, Micah, I'm framing the whole discussion. If the client has a cash flow issue and I know they have a lot of room, that's framing the discussion differently than if they have a cash flow issue and there's no more room, right?
Yes.
In the one, I'm saying, you know what, great news. We have a lot of extra room in the portfolio. Let's not even worry about that. Go ahead and buy that new truck. We'll turn up the income. On the other, I might be saying, hey, listen, we're already taking out the max or even a little bit lower, more than max. We're going to have to figure out a way to tighten our belts on this thing.
Yeah, and keep in mind, that's not your job to fix. And this is something that I definitely, I fell into a trap in a long time as a younger advisor, but it is not my responsibility to fix the client's spending or overspending. It's my job to articulate, this is the line, and be very clear, this is the line that we're going over, and what the consequences are we going after, and then maybe offer some general suggestions. But I'm not getting into a budget discussion with them and telling them how much they should spend on their Netflix or Hulu or utility bills or anything else like that, right? That's not a good thing. Now, I can implement good cash flow policies, and I can say, hey, look, most of the time when clients are overspending, it's in these areas. Here's a couple ways to watch out for it. I'm okay to do that, but I don't get into that other side of it.
I don't either. I do keep a stack of Dave Ramsey books because he has great advice on budgeting. And so every once in a while, I'll give those to clients. More often than not, by the way, I'm giving those to clients to give to their adult kids that have spending issues. But yeah, I'm not going to go into that. That's not, I don't want to get in that battle. I'm not going to win in that. Micah, what are some things that advisors that are going into Surge that can really next level their Surge? I know that something that comes to mind for me, we talked about this last week using Loom and BombBomb, is sending follow-up videos.
Yes.
If you're saying, hey, listen, I really want a next level. Now, reasons to next level. You want your practice to grow. You're just committed to delivering massive value. Maybe you have clients that you're a little bit nervous about, that after last year with the markets, you may think maybe the relationship needs some strengthening, or whatever that reason is. If you want to next level, sending a video summary after each meeting will next level. And then also, as we mentioned last week, doing a video summary for anybody who doesn't schedule for whatever reason. Mr. or Mrs. Client, I know we were going to try to meet. We weren't able to do that. Here's a couple things we were going to go over. If you have any questions, please reach out. And so it's critical to look for ways to next level.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's episode 190. So you can go to the perfectria.com/190 and you can listen to that episode. And yeah, that's exactly right. You got to look at next leveling these. The other way I would say to next level it is, how can you remove things from your agenda? I know it sounds crazy, right? But so often we want to throw so much stuff in there. Now, when we call it our blue folder because it's a blue folder that we put all of our client information in when we're preparing for Surge. That has probably more information in it than I'm going to cover, because I'm going to have the agenda, I'm going to have our buckets, I'm going to have our commentary, our RMD letter, our 1099 letter, or whatever our last value add is that we sent out. Then on my conference room table, I'm going to have the RTS tax guide and Secure Act 2.0 guide. And so I'm going to have those available, right? It's kind of like, I got so many arrows in the quiver just in case something comes up. I want to be prepared for it, but I don't, rookie move, I don't take all of those things out and put them on the table, because now when I'm 5 minutes up trying to wrap it up, clients are like, oh, we didn't go through these 10 other things that may not be appropriate. So I want to have some things because it solves my head trash, but I got to be careful when I'm opening that up. I'm only pulling out the things I know I need to cover in that meeting. Then I have more arrows in my quiver on standby that if I need them, they're right there.
Yeah, and it is good to articulate that to the team as well, why you have these things. So sometimes my team will say, in the past, they'll say, hey, I know this is just going to be a quick meeting. There never is. And so we didn't do all your case prep. Nope. I need all of my exact same case prep in every single meeting so that I can literally, without even looking, the XYZ question comes up. I know I flip down to page 7. I pull that thing out without even looking. I'm making eye contact the whole time. Then I can say, all right, let's look at whatever the case may be. So, Micah, to your point, I'm always coming in with the same arrows in my quiver, so that I know that I'm ready.
Another way to next level your meetings is have your relationship manager follow up a week to 2 weeks. We're about the 2 weekish, 10 days has worked out a little better for us with the clients. They follow up on any of the client homework to see where they're at, what they've uploaded, what they're having problems with, etc. They follow up with any our homework as well, because all our homework should be done by then, and to see if there's any other questions or things that come up. This adds one more touch from the relationship manager that gets to go out to all the clients to make sure things are being taken care of. And Jarvis, I don't know about you, but in my experience, the clients will tell the relationship managers things that they won't tell me. Not that they're hiding from me, but more stuff will come up because they're higher eyes, right? They personalize more, they socialize a little more. That's not right, my personality. And so those relationship managers will get that information, which could be key in passing along to us as well.
Micah, something we started doing a few years ago, I know your office does the same thing, is we want the relationship manager to have her own agenda as well when clients come in. Now, this is not a long one. This is not 5 bullet points. It's typically one thing. This could be, hey, let's update the copies of your driver's license that we have on file, which we keep on file for identity verification purposes, or let's update your trusted contacts. Or again, if we've just done the beneficiary value add, hey, did all these beneficiaries look correct? So when they're coming in, it's more than just, hey, what kind of coffee you would like. It's a really material thing. Hey, Matthew asked me to check on this with you real quick before I sit you down. Does everything look okay with that? Or any outstanding paperwork, whatever that may be. So don't waste that opportunity to set expectations, to get the client excited for the meeting, but also to deal some kind of valuable thing.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Jarvis, this podcast is all about action items. So what are some action items our listeners can take and implement this week that would improve their practice?
You know, one that I would say, and I know this is something that we both do in our office, is have a place to capture ideas or systems breakdowns that come up during search. We've talked about this a lot. There's some great videos in the Backstage Pass. I know, Micah, in your office, there's a place on the wall, and I have in Asana things to implement after search. That's where those big ideas come from, whether they're big ideas or things that you notice that are broken, that don't have to be fixed right then. That's where those get recorded. It has a space for you and the team to jot those ideas down.
You know, and midway through search, it's good to have a check-in with the team. It says, hey, you know, one of the things, we're always trying to make things more efficient. I know you guys are in the middle of this right now, and there's a lot of stuff going on. I'd love it if you'd write down for me, what are the things you're spending the most time on, and then how much time it's taking you right now. After search is done, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, printing out these buckets reports or these whatever reports just took forever. Then we go back and look at the times and say, well, it took 5 minutes. I mean, how long's forever, right? So while they're in the middle of it, I love them to find their pain points for 2 reasons. One is I want them to feel that they can express those pain points, that we're going to work to try to receive them, to fix them. Now, sometimes it's just work. You got to get your crap done. And other times it's like, hey, there is a more efficient way that we can do this. So I love that idea of the whiteboard is you put in there wins and peaks and valleys is now what our team likes to call it versus wins and losses. Peaks and valleys there. And then what do they want to change, et cetera. And on that, you know, the peaks and valleys side of it, on that valley side, any area that they're running into a stickler that it's spending a lot of time, that they feel it's wasting time and not delivering value, let us know what it is so we can address it after search. This keeps everybody motivated while we're going through the work.
I love that. For our Backstage Pass and Invictus members, remember, we've recorded dozens of videos. Both Micah and I, as well as our operations team, Colleen and Victoria, have done lots of videos on how to implement search. So both from the advisor standpoint and from the operations standpoint, that is all in there. If there's questions that you have about search that we haven't answered, go ahead and post those to our members-only forum. That's a great place to post your agenda or operations issues you're running into or whatever it is you're coming up against related to search. Odds are that either Mike and I or somebody as part of our community has been there. So don't hesitate to reach out. We have a community on this for a reason. Trying to silo and hide what works, what doesn't work, that's not getting us anywhere. Share, share, share.
I love it. And get your team on board with Surge. Let them know why it's going to benefit them, right? It's more work, just to be clear, right? You're condensing work. It's the same amount of work, just in less amount of time, right? But it's more energy that they need to put into it. You need to be able to show the rewards for them and set clear expectations. When the advisor surge ends, the operations surge does not. It goes on for another 2 weeks because you just finished up a last meeting. You set a lot of action items, things you need to get on. The ops team takes a week to 2 weeks to do that. So you got to set those great expectations that just because client meetings are done, their workload is going to keep going up until 2 weeks after. Then it should peter out. Vacation time's another great thing to talk about. We have blackout times. You don't get to take vacation during surge, right? And when someone comes up with that look on their face, is like, can I ask you a question? And it's like, if it's, can I take vacation during surge? The answer is no. And then they just kind of turn around and walk out. It's just like, no, these are the time that is the most critical. We have a lot of flexibility outside of this, but this time is the most critical. It's game day. We're all coming prepared for this. And Jarvis, I'd also say another action item. Yeah. March, we're having a nationwide webinar, so everybody is invited to attend in that. Oh, we're going to be talking about the one thing that you need to do that will dramatically improve your practice. And if you don't know what that one thing is, you better be on that webinar.
You better be on that webinar. Speaking of marking your calendars, the last week of September is the Perfect RIA Summit and the Retirement Tax Services Summit. We have a great lineup of speakers there. Oh, Mike has got his mug holding up. We've got Michael Henley coming to talk about why he does insanely large Roth conversions for himself and his clients. We've got Dean Barber coming to talk about how tax planning was a critical part of his massive RIA development. Of course, Stephen Jarvis is going to be there, the head of Retirement Tax Services. Micah, you're going to be there. I'm going to be there. it is going to be one of the best, if not the best, tax conference that exists in our industry for taking specific actionable advice in your practice. So watch for that invitation.
Jarvis, that's what I'm excited about. This isn't I love geeking out on theoretical tax stuff. I'm that type of nerd. However, this is actionable stuff that you can take at the end of the day. And so we're going to make sure at the end of each presentation that there's actionable items you're going to do. You're going to hear from advisors that are crushing it. You're going to hear from advisors that started off with zero, with nothing. They built it all themselves, and how they grew in this period of time, and that one thing that they did that they implemented in their practice that really had that 10x factor. Man, what I wouldn't give for that 20 years ago in my practice.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. There's more great speakers lined up that we can't announce just yet. But again, like you said, Mike, it's all people that have implemented tax planning, tax strategies in their practices from the whole gambit. So it can't be missed the last week of September. So again, thank you all for listening. 2023 is already shaping up to be one of the best years ever for Micah, for you and I, for our respective practices, for the Perfect RIA, for the entire nation. And until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.